Hey folks, welcome to Market Technical Analysis by InTheMoneyStocks.com, your leader in pure technical analysis, avoiding all that Wall Street hype. Today, Tuesday, June 17th, 2008. Well, as we get into today, folks, we're going to look at basically an unbelievably quiet day today in the markets, but we're going to start to look at some key things that are emerging here and a possible major event of sorts in the markets with a big movement that may be on the horizon here. And we're going to start to look at that overall and discuss it and look at the charts and what's leading us to believe that that could be occurring. We're also going to touch on oil and gold and a few key stocks that were in play today. But as we get into this first part of the video, let's first touch on what the markets did today. Overall, we saw a small drop in the markets on extremely light volume. And it was just, for the most part, ever since the open, we opened down a little bit, we slowly crept back higher, and then we saw a sell-off pretty much continuing, just slow and just dripping, if you would, the rest of the day. And at the end of the day, we had the Dow down about 109 points, the NASDAQ down 17, and the S&P down about 9. And you guys know, ever since the rally that led us to the end of Friday, we went back to a neutral stance on the market, and that basically has come to fruition here as we see that the markets were choppy yesterday with, the Dow up, the Dow down, the NASDAQ up. Little mixed action there on a non-event from yesterday. And then today, again, we had the markets down slightly on extremely light volume. This afternoon, it was just a crawl in the day trading chat room, which, we still have fun in there, but nonetheless, it was very, very slow. So let's get into the markets here again today, folks. And what we're going to show you here is that the markets were trending up into the open. And then pretty much right away what we saw was just continual slow selling. And you guys can see what happened here. A little drip down right into the 200 intraday ES moving average. And a little bit of bounce off of that. And then another drip down. And in spirit of bear flag, another drip down. And then we trended up early in the afternoon. And this often happens. Over lunchtime, you get that super light volume effect. And you just trend slowly up. And then once we got out of that early lunchtime volume afternoon area, you began to slowly sell again and had a little bounce and was basically sold and closed almost at the lows of the day here, pretty much on the lows if you would. Now, the key here in the market is what caused the various non-event of the market. And going into today, a lot of people thought there were going to be massive moves in the market because we had some big events this morning. You had Best Buy earnings, you had Goldman Sachs earnings, you had PPI, which was going to show whether or not we had massive amounts of inflation or not in this market, and there was just a lot of activity that people would have thought would have given this market a major move. But in reality, it didn't do much, to be honest. It really did not. Goldman Sachs came out with earnings, and they beat estimates nicely. But the key here is, and I went over this chart yesterday, remember, folks, we talked about how Goldman Sachs moved up basically $20, $25 into earnings, and how generally, and it's a generalization here, generally, once a company does that, even if they beat earnings, the move is already factored in on that beat, and thus it doesn't necessarily go up anymore. And that basically happened in Goldman Sachs. Earnings came out, and it moved down $2.65. If it had been trading down here on the lows, then on these earnings it probably would have gotten the spike. But because it had that move up of $20, $25, which was about 10-15% or so, it pulled back slightly on those numbers. And that's just a general thing that we've discovered throughout the markets and by reading the chart patterns and so forth. And this was basically a chart pattern that was telling you it was due for a little bit of a pause, pullback right into the 200 and the 20 moving averages right here. So we're going to continue to watch Goldman Sachs for future moves, as it is the number one leader in the financial sector there, as everything pretty much follows with Goldman Sachs. If Goldman's rolling ahead, the chances are the financials, the XLF, is doing pretty well. All right. Now, going back to the ES here, folks, actually we're going to move over to the SPY because I want to talk on a few things. Now, a lot of people, we all remember oil, right? And I'm switching to the daily on the SPY here. But remember how we talked about how oil over 130 has a direct inverse relationship with the markets? Well, today we saw that coming to fruition. And you saw it. You basically had a little bit of a move up in oil and then a move down and so forth. And for the most part, oil was basically flat all day, and that let the markets kind of just trend. All right, and I think that's part of the reason why we saw that very light volume, as oil was just trading sideways for the most part today. And before we go into the USO on the daily, the SPY on the daily, we'll flip to the USO on the intraday, and you guys can see exactly what's going on here. Notice the trend here in oil. All right, we started the day positive, came down, and then you move back to the positive side. Then you trended down and moved up a little bit, and then basically traded sideways into the close. So a very, very little volatility in the oil market, which is actually very, very strange considering how much volatility we've seen lately. So now one thing I want to point out on this intraday chart, and this is something we mentioned in the chat room, folks, is that oil has a key line of a breakdown here in it on the intraday. Look at this line right here, and you can see how it hammered on this line multiple times today. All right, and even yesterday. This is the move down yesterday, which again coincided on a low from the day before. So let's flip that back and see if we can see that. Alrighty, and here we go. All right, so you can even draw this line right here. All right, this line is what gave us yesterday's line. All right, and yesterday's line created a new line of support at 108, and we moved that over, and you basically have this new line here, which has had 3 to 4 hits on it. And this is a trend line support area at 108 on the USO. So continue to watch this line, as this could be a key breakdown. Should we see oil pierce this and start trading below, you could see a very dramatic drop in oil and the USO. The USO may drop from 108 at that breakdown point all the way down to around 105, which is where we see some next significant support area. So watch that 108 area on the USO very, very closely. And in tune with that, the oil is the inventory numbers are going to come out tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So watch that very, very closely tomorrow, as the volatility will be immense. All these oil inventories that come out every Wednesday are just very, very active. All right, they cause major spikes up, major declines, and then reversals and so forth. So you want to be careful trading that. If you're one of the traders, that like to trade the oil numbers, be careful on that number, as it can whipsaw you out very quickly. Okay, now let's go back to the SPY here and look a little bit. All right, we're looking at the intraday SPY, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to flip over to the 60-minute just so we can see a little bigger trend area. And I mentioned that we were seeing a possible key level here that may be signaling a big push, and that could also coincide with what we're feeling of a possible decline in oil. So we may see a little upside in the market. So be very ready for that, all right? There may be some sort of event, and it may be oil dropping big. We're not really sure what's going on, but we do have somewhat of an intermediate turn date for possibly tomorrow in the markets, and so we're going to kind of just watch closely tomorrow, all right? Because of the light volume in the last 2 days, it's been hard to gauge this turn date, but it's on the horizon, and usually we're very fearful of talking about options expiration turn dates, but we have to obviously alert you guys that we're seeing the possibility of something going on there for tomorrow. So keep a close eye on that. And I just want to point out this, and this is just a trend on the 60-minute you can see. Notice these trend line support lines. I mean, how amazing is it? You have a point here, you connect it right on through here, and right to this low here, all the way through. And we actually did come in a little bit, but we're basically resting on the 60-minute 50 moving average here, and you can ignore that line right there as no consequence. Not only that, but you can actually see there's a parallel trend channel that we've been in here, and you actually did have a little bit of a dip here. So again, we have to watch to see whether or not we have a turn date tomorrow again. But because it's options expiration, the volatility will be intense. Tomorrow's Whipsaw Wednesday, and you have to be cautious. All right. So even though we're talking about it, we're being very cautious on playing this turn date because of the whipsaw of options expiration Wednesday and so forth. And we'll obviously know more tomorrow. It's better off that we let this one go and then just analyze it right after it's done. And we'll analyze that in tomorrow's video. So make sure you tune back in tomorrow so we can reanalyze these charts and see if anything did come to fruition. All right? On the daily chart, you guys can see what's basically going on here. We had that high here, which was a double top from this area on the SPY and a pierce of the 200. You had that fall where we called a bounce right here, called a sell here, and again called a bounce there. And then the drop was called from this point here, which was a beautiful drop. Now you're seeing that little bit of almost a flag pattern here, and this has to be watched, all right? And this is why we're kind of up in the air whether or not it's going to be a turn date that's going to be a hard sell or a hard buy here, because the charts here are telling us that there's a necktie in this area of the 50 and the 20, or just a diverging necktie anyways, and this is generally a bearish pattern on the daily. So while we're seeing some divergences on our turn date here, what's going on, folks, there's two scenarios. One is oil breaks that 108 level and falls hard, causing a rally in the markets and the possible continued fall in oil. And ultimately, we do think oil is coming down, as it is very, very overbought, probably coming down to that 110-ish area in the not-too-distant future. The other side of it could be is that this chart pattern is also telling us that there may be one big push. So we're looking at a turn date tomorrow. We're not 100% sure on which way it's going to go, but that's why we're going to wait till after tomorrow to know for sure, and we should see a little more recognition by tomorrow's candle on the chart. And it's always just another piece of the puzzle, so we're going to plug in that piece tomorrow and see if it tells us anything in particular. All right, guys? That's pretty much all I have for today, folks. We saw the GLD moving up a little bit, and we'll flip to the daily. And you can see the GLD is underneath resistance right here and support right here on the gold. So you have it in a tight little range. Now, which way is it going to break? Do we see a break up here out of that resistance or a break down below this support? All right, folks, have a wonderful day. I encourage you all to come join the chat room, as it is a phenomenal learning tool. We coach in there. We trade in there. It's been a phenomenal trading market lately. Also, come join the Swing Trade Alerts. Contact us for consulting. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.